So welcome everyone to our last session of the Global Innovation Readiness webinar series. Or as my colleague Lokesh would say, it's the final season, or not, we have another series coming up, but it's, we're excited to conclude this first Global Innovation Readiness webinar series. And for our final theme, we'll be looking at orchestrating global readiness. And with our guest speaker, Bryan, Semkuley, a founder of Brandvation and soon to be Global Innovation and Marketing Leader at Global Minds Network. And myself, Karina Jensen, founder and Executive Director of Global Minds Network. So we have launched this series, as many of you now know. It was really to take a look at how can we better innovate and collaborate in this changing world. And as we've seen in the last few months, it's very dynamic, it's interdependent, and it's changing in terms of our digital connections and how we're able to innovate and collaborate. And so we thought it would be timely to introduce this series, really to take a look at how can we better facilitate this through new frameworks and models. And, many of us have joined us on this journey, which started on May 21st, and now our final session on today, June 25th. And so we've taken the full journey from looking at what are these success factors, how do we lead, what is leadership about in this new environment, how to orchestrate strategic co-creation, facilitating virtual teams, shaping a global innovation culture, and now finally let's look at how to facilitate global transformation. So just before we get started, I wanted to check in with everyone to make sure the sound is okay. If you can text or in the chat box, just say hello and tell us where you're calling in from in your local language. I'll say bonjour from Paris, and a very hot and sunny Paris today, but maybe you can just chat or check in and see where you're calling in from, just to make sure the sound is okay. So let's check it out. Okay, so where are people calling in from today? So we got somebody, there we go. We got everybody coming on board from Wisconsin, from Stockholm, Sweden. Namaste from Bangalore. Oh, I know we have more out there. Okay, this is good though. So looks like everyone can hear me well. Sound is good. I have positive feedback. Ah, look, we even have somebody from Swaziland. Say hello from Swaziland. This is great. Greetings from all over, from the States, from Europe, from Asia, from Africa. So we're moving around the world. This is great. All right. And so just as a reminder, most of you know by now, Zoom webinars is a bit different. So you'll have two toolbars. If you have questions please, throughout the webinar, please type them into the Q&A box so that we can answer them at the end. We'll save the last 15, 20 minutes for Q&A. And then you have the chat box for any comments, thoughts, questions, or comments and thoughts mostly. So you have those two tools available for you. You'll be muted during the presentation session, but then for the Q&A, feel free to type the question, or you can voice it as well. All right, so let's get started. A little bit about us, Global Minds Network. Our vision is to inspire global minds to collaborate and innovate in order to make a positive impact in the world. And we really do that through our mission to facilitate global innovation and multicultural collaboration. In that sense, to accelerate global organizational performance and international market success. And we have a team of international advisors with a vision to connect and inspire. We are a team of international leaders, innovators, and change makers who bring expertise at the intersection of global innovation, leadership, multicultural collaboration, and digital transformation. And we are growing our team, and as you see, you'll meet our newest team member, Bryan Semkuley, who's our guest speaker. We will also welcome Marine Leroux-Thibault, our international or global and design leader. So we're going to take a look at, this is really going to be a review of what are the key change levers for global innovation readiness and how can we ensure your success for launching global initiatives from concept to market. And so first, before we get started, we'd like to know where you're at now, since you've taken this journey with us. Most of you have been on the journey. We'd like to know, where are you in terms of global readiness? Would you say that you're more a world cruise planner? You have a good plan in the organization, but still need to get all hands on deck, more team engagement across regions? Or would you see that your organization is more of a global accelerator? So right now you're making good progress, but there's still a need for strategic alignment, more resources and support to succeed. Or maybe you would see that you're more of a future globetrotter on this level. That means that organization is making excellent progress. Leaders and teams are moving ahead. However, there are more needs for assessment and fine tuning before you can ensure success. And then global readiness champion. Maybe there's some of you out there already making it happen, or you're ready to launch a global solution and all systems are go. So I'd like you to take a look at those 4 levels, and I'm gonna bring up a poll for you and see where everybody's at. So please make sure to participate, because it would be great to see where everybody is at today. So there's the poll for you. Give you 30 seconds. Please, welcome. Go ahead and answer. That's great. More participants in the poll. Okay, we're going to give you 30 seconds, 10 more seconds. We're waiting for a few more answers. Keep them coming. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. So any last minute voters? Okay, I'm going to close it right now. And let's see. So the winner is, can everybody see the poll? Ah, there. Can everyone see now? Okay, so the winner is the World Cruise Planner. It looks like most of you are at the stage where you do have the plan, you're ready to launch, but you still need to ensure alignment across regions, across cross-functional, cross-cultural teams. So the World Cruise Planner, and then it's fairly even between the Global Accelerator, the Future Globetrotter, and Global Readiness Champion. But we do have a few Readiness Champions out there, so that's good to see. Participating in our poll, and let's there. Okay, so let's take a look and see where we can take you next. So if we look at leading global innovation and our innovation readiness framework that we've shared throughout these series, what is important to see is how to ensure sustainability of your global innovation cycle. So how to ensure that you can succeed at every phase, from strategic co-creation, ideation, to strategic planning, to validation of your concept, your solutions, to go to market, ensure marketing and sales readiness for high performance, both internally and externally. And so we've been sharing these change levers with you on how to ensure success along that cycle. And the first is vision. The second is dialogue, and the third is space. So vision, ensuring a compelling global vision around inclusive leadership and strategic co-creation, and that nurtures an inclusive dialogue for virtual and on-site team collaboration through increased knowledge sharing and cross-cultural learning, and that in turn shapes the space, helps build a thriving global innovation culture and a creative team climate. So we're going to take a closer look at these areas, and from the second session in the webinar, we explored global innovation leadership. So what are these new competencies for leadership today? Because they're changing, and we can no longer look at the older frameworks and models, because we're facing an environment that, again, is global, interdependent, multicultural, and digitally connected, and the dynamics are shifting. So we have to look at how can leaders today successfully navigate this environment, especially one that is increasingly project and team driven. That means that you really need to take a look at what are those skills that are required for the different phases of a global innovation initiative. And we found through our research that there are particular leadership mindsets and behaviors and skill that need to be considered throughout these phases. And the first of all, in looking at launching that initiative or exploring the market, coming up with the ideas, in the co-creation phase or the creation phase, that's where we see that leadership behaviors need to be more empowering. So leaders really need to pay attention at how to encourage more initiatives and ideas from their teams around the world, and to also ensure that they can co-create, that they can engage in the front-end process, and that they are inspired to do so. And so let's take particular leadership behaviors, empowering behaviors. And then that leads us to the next phase in terms of strategic planning and co-creation. To look at more inclusive, we see that leaders who are most successful are using inclusive behaviors, really paying attention to how do they integrate knowledge from their teams, from across disciplines and across cultures, but also pay attention to data, local data. So really inclusive and integrative in that planning process to really arrive at more of a strategic co-creation approach. And then that leads us to the next phase, which is validation. How to ensure that you can validate the concept, a new service or product or solution, to ensure that there's a sound business case. And there we see that it requires more decisive behaviors, how to ensure that you can integrate the right data, the right knowledge, and build an effective business case that truly speaks to multiple markets, especially international markets. And that in turn will then lead to effective execution, where leaders need to pay attention to communicative behaviors. How are leaders sustaining that process throughout execution on the ground, paying attention to customer needs and changes, and really gathering knowledge from local teams, but as well as customers and those local communities, to respond rapidly and to really be agile during that execution process. And that in turn leads to global team performance. And then if we look at the next lever within vision, is looking at strategic co-creation. So how to move away from global to local, move away from this traditional approach of having one global strategy and trying to push that out into the markets and push that into local markets and communities where the strategy may not be applicable. So we feel that it's important to use a local to global approach in the strategic co-creation process, and looking more closely at how do you create a more inclusive process within front-end innovation in terms of developing a sound ideation process. And in our third webinar session, my colleagues, Lokesh Venkataswamy, our international innovation and design leader, really helped us understand how important it is to develop a comprehensive methodology, design and ideation methodology within the organization. And especially one that's inclusive, that pays attention to a multicultural innovation environment and allows every voice to be heard, and ensuring that you truly understand what's needed in the different regions and the different markets, but that they also are invited to contribute to those ideas and help shape them. And that really has an impact on execution or effective new product development or concept development, as well as go-to-market. And this is especially important, is also emphasized by my colleague, also Kai-Meng Wang, who is our international strategist and change leader. And she really emphasized in China, throughout the Asia region and internationally, how much we need to pay attention to the talent, design talent that exists there, and how they truly can help us to understand local market needs and also help build more success within those markets. And that leads us to inclusive dialogue or virtual team collaboration, which we're facing in today's world, more so that looking at how can we truly connect teams all over the world and also ensure that critical knowledge is shared. And so we discussed in our fourth session, a webinar session, looking at how to facilitate that process. And my colleague, Thomas Arendt, who's our international or global innovator and product leader, shared how important it is to pay attention to the process and looking at how to build that in throughout the global innovation process, creating moments of conversation, moments of exchange. And we saw that as well with our client, Xenova, a global innovation market platform, who are they're collaborating with thousands of innovators all over the world and forming teams that respond to client needs. And we had worked with them to create this global innovation facilitation training program. And what was really critical there was to pay attention to how they could share more knowledge, how they could really optimize learning online through knowledge sharing sessions, through dynamic and interactive tools, and also ensure that that learning could then again be applied to their innovation sessions online. And so that goes back to a framework that is focused more on inclusive dialogue, which means that it starts with your social network. How do you connect those voices within your social network, within your organization? And then how do those connections lead to more conversations online or on site for knowledge sharing? And then that leads to cross-cultural learning. So it takes a leader as knowledge facilitator. It requires an effective platform and interactive workflows, as well as collaborative tools. And that leads us to our fifth session, where we focused on global innovation culture. And we invited Boeing to come in and give us a wonderful study to look at our case study, where we had Elvira Meyer-Comte, who came in, the head of their VP of HR at Airbus. And she really shared how important it is to focus on local communities and build these interactions throughout the organization. And that leads really to our framework around global innovation culture. Throughout a decade of research, what has been shown is that companies who do best are really the ones who create values around cultural empathy, around creativity and collaboration. And cultural empathy meaning how the organization places emphasis on culturally diverse teams and collaboration, so this new team-driven environment, and how the organization makes time for creativity, for more ideation and innovative thinking, and finally how collaboration is supported through increased transparency and knowledge sharing. And so that leads us to a creative team climate, which is more responsive, transparent, entrepreneurial, and leads to execution success. And there you really need to pay attention to those culture drivers and routines. As emphasized by my colleague, Finn Meilergaard, who was our session leader last week, he focused very much on the creative purpose and the importance of optimizing cultural diversity for innovation and building that culture. And that is really shaped by the culture drivers or routines. So ensuring interactive dialogue, a shared workspace online or physically, to ensure collaboration. And then ensuring it's a multicultural innovation process. It's not just one standard process, but it's a process that invites adaptation from the different regions, from your local teams, and that requires an effective collaboration platform and tools that will invite those conversations and ensure every voice is heard. And that finally leads to an inclusive mindset for leaders and teams, that they adapt this inclusive mindset and really ask, first and foremost, well, how does this process represent our multicultural organization? How does this represent regions or in our customers as well around the world? So if we summarize quickly, look at global innovation readiness, what is important here is to pay attention to that vision. Really think about, how does your organization establish a common vision, values, and language to ensure global innovation readiness, where the leader is knowledge facilitator and innovation orchestrator, and you really practice co-creation. The second area, dialogue. Ensure that your organization can create dynamic and interactive conversations, that it's truly an inclusive dialogue where knowledge sharing is encouraged and learning is continuous. And then finally, the space, how to shape a collaborative space online and offline for transparent communication, and where every team across the regions is encouraged to share and to help nurture that innovation culture. And that results in an organization that is successful in leading global innovation. And what has been found through my research and the combined experience of my colleagues here at Global Minds Network is really that organizations who have been most successful in these environments of global, multicultural, digitally connected environments are those who have paid attention to these three levers. In terms of vision and dialogue and space. And with that, I'd like to invite my colleague and our speaker, Semkuley, Global Innovation Marketing Leader at Global Minds Network. And he has just recently joined us, so we're very excited to welcome him, as well as to hear his insights today. Bryan is recognized for his leadership in driving business value and brand growth. He's led global innovation teams and programs at Kimberly-Clark at InBev, and he is really a seasoned leader with unique expertise in marketing strategy, brand-led innovation development, and commercialization. So he can truly talk about what is needed from concept to market. So I'd like to welcome Bryan.
Thank you very much, Karina. I'm thrilled to have been invited to join the Global Minds Network, so thank you for that, and very pleased to be able to share some of my insights and perspectives on innovation, in particular around execution in the marketplace with innovation. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak with everyone today, and hello everyone. So with that, if we look at innovation and in-market success, all of us can think about what hinders global innovation performance and that international market success. And looking at our own businesses and previous experiences, has it traditionally been a lack of ideas? Is it marginal solutions? Or is it poor market execution? And as I've described it, stick-to-itiveness. That is, sticking with the initiative long enough to ensure it gets established. And my perspective would be that most organizations don't have a lack of ideas, and they're pretty good at developing solutions, but more innovation tends to fail with poor market execution. So with that, you can get superior results from superior execution, and importantly, organizational collaboration and coordination, as Karina has outlined. So question you've answered already is, what is the level of your global innovation readiness? And it's great to see that half of you are well on your way, and that there's areas for opportunities for others that are on the call today. So it's my inherent belief that there is definitely a connection between your successful results and in-market success. And so the higher up you can put yourself on that readiness pole, the more likely you will have a successful initiative. Karina has presented this previously in terms of the importance of having global launch alignment prior to bringing an initiative to market. But it's been my experience both at Kimberly-Clark and at InBev that this generally needs to happen much earlier in the innovation development process, that it tends to be brought forward after full product development. And in many instances, I've seen the conversations that come about through go-to-market strategies and launch preparation actually ultimately may in fact impact the final design and the final configuration of the product or service that you may be bringing to market. So therefore, it's important to start this much sooner in the process. My perspective on innovation from a philosophical and I guess from a focus perspective is I really do believe in being centered on driving brand-led innovation from ideation all the way through to commercialization, with a particular emphasis on your go-to-market strategy and the components that make that strategy up. And that it's really required with significant planning to then get executed with excellence and ultimately achieve and ensure in-market success and maximize the ROI that the organization has put on bringing that innovation to market. So if we look at, how do we actually kind of make that happen? I've got a simple construct here of what I call the brandvation diamond of, who is it that we're targeting? What is the solution or offering that you're bringing forward? Where are you going to bring it forward? And then ultimately, how are you going to execute against that? And it's, important that all the upfront components are looked after and completed in terms of really understanding who it is that you're going to be targeting with your new service or offering. What are all the data analytics, trends, insights? Do you really understand the core needs of that target market? And do you have them segmented appropriately so that you can understand the differences of those segments and then understand the journey that they take to actually purchase or execute the service that you're bringing forward? Do you really have the right solution or offering? Is it brand-led? And that brand-led component could be the corporate brand, it could be a product brand, could be a service brand, and ensure that you're being claims-driven to be able to bring that differentiated product to market. And as we heard a couple of weeks ago, the importance of having design thinking and validation in that process to ensure that that product or service has been thought through as clearly as possible. And then importantly, where are you going to bring that forward on a global basis? Are you going to look at specific launch markets to potentially be pilots or to be front-end markets before you completely launch a global initiative? And then which channels are you going to be focused on? Are they going to be on online channels, offline channels, particular retailers? Are you going to launch with global key customers or national key customers? And then what category are you really going to put it in? I've got examples in my previous life at Kimberly-Clark where we would have brought some products to market and we weren't sure which aisle we would best be placing that product in. So we had to make those decisions before we went to market as well. And then how, importantly, what brand is going to carry that initiative to market, ensuring that that innovation really is in support of the brand proposition and brand positioning. Do you have all the benefits fully articulated? What are your points of difference? What are going to be the reasons to believe for your target market? And what's your frame of reference from a competitive perspective? And then ensuring that you have the right communication plans and commercial implementation in place to execute against that. So it's been my experience that typically, in the innovation process, there's not enough time spent on the where and how components. And that's what I'd like to bring some additional insight and detail to today, is the importance of really going through that work in the development process prior to launch. So with that, I would say there's a commercial readiness construct that you can look at with 4 phases to it. And the first is ensure that you really do have a compelling offering to bring forward to the market. Secondly, really understand how it is you're going to make money. Thirdly, what are all the components as to how we're going to go to market? And then once you've launched, how do you ensure that you're going to win in the market over time? So if we look at phase 1, I think it's important that we look at really ensuring that you do have a clear value proposition and that you really have it anchored in a crisp, clear value prop that is differentiated, relevant, salient, and again, brand-led. Do you have compelling claims and benefits that is going to cement that offering with your customers and consumers with powerful reasons to believe? And then initiate commercial program development. Think about those program ideas and components as to how you're going to go to market and engage with your customers and bring your offering to life. So start thinking about that even in phase 1. Then as you move to phase 2, ensure that you've gone through the rigor to really size the opportunity correctly and look at the forecasting that's going to be required to bring that product to market so that you can adequately engage with the supply chain and the operations team to ensure that you're not going to have shortages or you're not going to overproduce up front, and ensure that you've got the right KPIs in place for that launch period. Business model planning and scenario planning, I think, is extremely important, and I'm an advocate of the business model canvas. I think it helps you answer and the right questions as you move forward with your business proposition, and ensure that you look at multiple scenarios as to how you might want to turn and spin the business model in different ways depending on the opportunity. Importantly, have a pricing strategy appropriately put in place that is driven by value, not by cost plus, which I still see too many organizations thinking about, and ensuring that your competitive frame of reference comes into play appropriately as you look at the pricing strategy, which may differ on a market by market basis as well with a global launch. And then finally, the earlier that you can start engaging your market and your target customers with prototyping, experiments, piloting, and get real sort of responsive learning, I think is super important to the evolution of not only the launch development program, but also potentially modifications to the actual product or service before final launch. And then as you move to phase 4, do you really have, phase 3, do you have the capability and capacity within the organization to actually launch? Not all countries, markets may have the same capability and capacity to launch. So taking that into account is very, very important as you look at a global rollout. Do you have all your go-to-market strategies and components in place, and how might those differ on a country or market basis? If you look at your commercialization plans and organizational coordination, how do you engage effectively both the internal stakeholders and external stakeholders that are going to be important to make your innovation successful once it comes to market, and especially across multiple markets? Talked about commercial program execution now. How do you go to market? How do you engage with customers? What is the means by your sales organization or your own communication teams engaging with your customers? And then lastly, next round of, or next phase of in-market learning, prototyping, and experimenting, and continuing to cycle different iterations of your product, your service, and potentially the business model to garner more and more learning before your final launch. And then once you get to phase 4, where you're going to ensure that you're going to win in the market, definitely take some time. I would say most organizations I've worked with haven't spent enough time thinking about competitive response scenarios and thinking about if competitor A is going to respond in this manner to your initiative, what is going to be your first step or your second step or third step, and having that all planned out well in advance will definitely help ensure that the launch and cementing that product in the market is going to get established much easier. Do you have the right in-market monitoring and milestones in place? Have you set forward what your distribution targets are in month 1, month 3, month 6, 12 months out? Pricing targets, what's your velocity, etc. So ensuring that you've at least given some thought to what your expectations are, because those should have driven the net sales value or the expected value that you think that initiative is going to generate year 1, year 2, year 3. And then importantly, and I would say most of the time, people don't spend enough time on creating a post-launch assessment documentation and a report for the organization to really understand what the learnings are, both in terms of what was done well, what could have been done better, what did we miss on, so that those mistakes can be avoided. And through that report out process, how do you feed new initiatives that are in the pipeline with that information so that they can avoid the potential mistakes that were made, or take advantage of the right things that were done much earlier in their innovation development process. So with that, what I would say is when you look at the commercial readiness construct relative to the global launch alignment process, my belief is that some of this work should be done through parallel pathing versus sequentially. And the earlier that you can start to work on these different components earlier in the process, they will feed each other and allow that new product introduction and post-launch management to be much more successful over the long term. And I think it's important to understand these differences on a global basis, but also at the individual market level. So a few other pearls of, I guess, wisdom or perspective that I'd like to share with everyone is, truly do understand those capability differences that different markets, different countries have in trying to execute a global rollout, and be cognizant of those and potentially even group them into groups of like-minded or like capability markets. The earlier that you can transition from thinking to doing, I think is very helpful. We used to have a term, try to get things off the bench as fast as you can and in front of your potential customer or consumer to get real perspectives and learning from them that can be inputted into the development process. And part of that is really to think more like a startup and have a startup mentality and think about doing things a little bit more, not necessarily on the fly, but doing things quicker, sooner, with the intent really that you want to learn sooner. Internally, how do you ensure the right content, context, and construct in your communication with the internal organization so they understand really what the initiative is, who you're targeting, why it's important for the organization, and what their role is in being able to make it successful. When I spoke to in-market testing and prototyping, I would encourage you to leverage the friendlies. And what do I mean by leverage the friendlies? Look at those key customers that you have excellent relationships with, that are willing to actually learn with you and sort of be at the front end of bringing an initiative to market. They will be huge advocates for you, not only in helping shape your final product or your final service, but they will become advocates for you once you're in market. Transition from get it to market to ensure commercial success. I think there's a lot of pressure that many organizations go through in terms of getting new initiatives to market on a particular timeline or on a particular need that sometimes gets in the way of ensuring that you're going to have commercial success. So don't cut corners. Make sure you've got all the plans in place and the scenarios thought out well in advance of bringing your initiative to market. Another thing I would just caution you to be aware of is organizational fatigue. In many instances, your organizations have been living with and working on the initiative for months, if not years sometimes. And so once you finally bring it to market, remember that your customer or consumer has only been living with it for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and ensuring that you internally, live more like the timeline that your customers and consumers are living, despite the fact that you as an organization have been developing this for a number of months or years. And then finally, just understand that you can suffer from internal sabotage. I mean, it's not necessarily one of those things that many people talk about, but there are, people, teams, business units sometimes that don't want to see other business units and teams succeed with their initiatives. So at least be cognizant that that is a possibility, and how do you ensure that you've got the entire organization internally aligned, on board, and at least supportive of the initiative, even if they're not necessarily directly involved with it. So with that, I will turn it over to Karina and myself for any Q&A that we might have at this time.
So I'm going to open it up. We have almost 15 minutes for Q&A and exchange. So we welcome your questions, your thoughts, your comments, your feedback. I know one question. Oh, we've got several questions already. Let's see. I've got one question in terms of to Bryan. What have you found to be the most critical success factor for marketing and sales readiness?
Uh, Frankly, internal communication and ensuring that you've got a good project manager who's really running the project effectively and documenting material, get the Gantt charts in place, and frequently, review those not only with the direct team, but share those in particular with senior leadership. I think having senior leadership, whether that's the president of the business unit that's going to be launching the initiative and or his executive team, ensuring that they're on board on a regular communication cadence of maybe once a month, once every 6-8 weeks, is very, very important so that they're not necessarily surprised by the development of the initiative and how you as a team have maybe taken it in a different direction from when it was conceived, so that they're not surprised as you get further down the development cycle.
That's great. I had another question on, you had, there's one more here, on leveraging the friendlies. Could you give an example of how that could be done?
Sure, I can do that with a live example from my Kimberly-Clark days. One of the vertical market segments that was important to us were office buildings, and we were looking at bringing a new initiative forward into those office buildings. And so we went out to our sales organization and we asked them, who are some of our good long-time office building customers, and who are those facility managers that are advocates of KC and the products that we produced and sort of the service that we provided to those customers. And in that instance, that customer was willing to actually execute some piloting and prototyping for us around new products and new services that we were looking at bringing to market. So getting your sales organization involved and or your supply chain, depending where the initiative may be happening, are really good sources to find who those friendlies are.
Great, thanks, Brian. We've got another big question here. What do you see as the importance of science and technology in driving meaningful innovation?
Oh, I think I know who that might even have come from. I think it's super important, and we've had numerous conversations around that. I mean, obviously science and technology is a massive enabler to bringing new innovation to market. I think what's really important is that the brand teams and the marketing teams really not only consult, but inform the science and technology teams as to where they're trying to take the brand, what new opportunities, what new insights have they found around the target market that should be sort of sought out and could be solved from a science and technology perspective. And then importantly, I mentioned this earlier, what is the claim that you really want to make to be able to bring that product to market? Because that is one of the best guidances I think you can give your science and technology and R&D teams, is what claim you want to go make so that they can go figure out how to deliver against that with that new science and new technology.
Nice. Well, the questions keep coming, so I'm going to keep feeding them to you. I'll jump in if needed, but there's many compliments, great presentation. And a question, do you have any examples that you followed in terms of an organization following the right process, but the product failed? Any failure stories out there?
Oh, I've got lots of failure stories. Lots of failure stories. Yeah, well, without specifics, I think there's one example I can speak to where we really did understand a new opportunity that we wanted to bring forward in the health and hygiene market. And science and technology, new science, actually helped bring it to market. And unfortunately, I would say, by having not engaged the selling organization fast enough so that they could understand the value prop clearly and more deeply, we actually didn't get the right pricing strategy in place. And so in this particular instance, we ended up pricing the product that had significant new benefits at parity to the competitor. And what we sort of found out months later was that the consumer actually didn't believe that the benefits we were touting were actually there because we weren't charging more for it. So in fact, they just saw it as a parity product, not one with new benefits because of how we priced it. Had we probably priced it 40, 50% higher, I think consumers would have believed that it had the efficacy that it had because of that price premium.
That's great. And thanks to Beat Dokamara, I think I pronounced that right for the question, Dokamara. And Lokesh also, Lokesh Venkataswamy, who gave us a question. I have another question. It's interesting because we tend to focus on large organizations in our conversations, multinational firms, maybe fast growth, medium-sized companies. And I have a question from Michelle Messina. When a small company wants to expand to new geographic markets, how should they build credibility in that new market?
So a great example, and I've had to do this in my recent couple of years. I've been involved with a couple of craft breweries here in Georgia, but if I also go back to my time with Labatt USA in particular, I would say one of the most important things to do is really understand what I would describe as the concentric circle strategy. So if you're in a particular geographic area and you start to have consumers that understand your product in that geographic area and approximate to you, that you can start to move out 100 miles, 200 miles, where at least you've got some latent awareness and you can leverage the success that you've got in your market nearby. I would definitely not advocate what I would call a paratrooper strategy, which is, you've got a strong market in, say, Buffalo, New York. I wouldn't suddenly launch in Tampa, Florida, for example. I would probably go to Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Cleveland as an example, which is exactly the strategy that we followed with a number of our Canadian brands, which was really a concentric circle strategy. And year after year, we just made the circle wider and bigger so that we could actually garner the strength of not only customer and consumer awareness, but frankly, media and other marketing opportunities.
Yeah, and I would add to that also the importance of building those local communities, and that in terms of looking at the local experts and optimizing local teams or colleagues who can make those connections for you and increase that knowledge sharing in that sense.
Exactly, yeah.
We have another question. Let's see here. We've got a question from Nitin. Innovation readiness seems to be looking at tech capabilities and capacity. How necessary is it to focus on individual readiness? And what skills are necessary for individual readiness to supplement innovation readiness?
So a great question. And so actually almost another sub-question to last week's seminar on culture as well, and the importance of driving an innovation culture in the organization, and how does that permeate down to the individual level. And I think one of the important things that I've done in my previous global leadership positions is actually conduct frankly a capabilities assessment of the team and really understand where they do have strengths in innovation development, whether they be technical, they be marketing, they be commercial, and find out where those deficiencies are, and then really put programs and/or training sessions together to help elevate those individuals to at least what I would describe as remove their deficiencies, to at least get them to a parity level. But importantly, I really believe that what you really want to do is leverage people's strength and really enhance their strengths, because that's where you're going to get greater, I think, value from individuals, is by really, really leveraging what they themselves are really good at and bring forward that others can't.
Yeah, and I would emphasize again, as we've shared in our webinars, the importance of leadership development these days and leadership readiness, because the traditional skills or competencies do not necessarily apply in this new environment. And what we found through research and our experience is this importance of developing these mindsets and capabilities, especially around the creative mindset, critical thinking, collaboration, looking at how leaders' mindset and behaviors can help accelerate that global innovation cycle and encourage and engage teams. And that's becoming increasingly important, especially as we're digitally connected and teams feel more remote and isolated. So it's going to be important for leaders to reach out to them and use a more inclusive approach throughout the innovation process. And I'm curious, we have, we're nearing that. We still have a few more minutes if anybody has questions or thoughts. I have just a quick question for everyone. Maybe you can type your answer in the chat. But for you right now, currently facing your global initiatives in your organization and moving ahead, what is occupying your mind right now? What is your, maybe the biggest, what could we call it, preoccupation in your, in one word? What is really critical for you right now? We'd be curious to know if you can type that in the chat box. It'd be interesting to hear everyone's feedback.
And maybe while people are doing that, Karina, I do see one more question that came through, which is, can you help? What are general mistakes startups do in branding and go-to-market strategy? In all sincerity, I think two things. One is they don't really necessarily take some time to think about their brand and really what it is their brand position is going to be, and do so in a thorough manner. But once you've settled on that, be very consistent in how you present it to the market over time. And consistency is your ally as a brand marketer. But you got to make sure you got it right at the beginning. So make sure that you spend the time up front at the beginning to really understand what your brand is. And when I mean brand, I do mean brand. I don't mean a trademark. And I think many startups don't understand the difference between a brand and a trademark. And they need to go from trademark to brand.
That's great. Thanks for that. And I see one more question. I think we have another question related to AI and the future, which I know my colleague, we addressed somewhat in the leadership webinar. My colleague David Ragland was speaking about the future of AI and technologies and its impact on leaders. And this question is really about that. How do you anticipate AI taking over the marketing strategy with humans, just bringing in the new ideas?
My perspective would be, as AI becomes much more effective and pervasive, that I think it's going to be an excellent tool to hone things down much quicker. And I think one of the things I've always sort of professed is at the front end of innovation, for me, it's actually been much more important to understand which ideas or initiatives not to pursue, as opposed to finding the one or two or three that are the perfect ones. So just the elimination of a whole bunch of poor or less advantageous opportunities is a huge opportunity. So I think AI can probably help in that very quickly up front. At the other end, as it relates to execution, I think it can probably help formalize and speed the process up. But at the end of the day, humans buy emotionally. We all know that there's functional and rational reasons why we purchase or consume certain products, but there is a huge emotional component to that sometimes only another human might be able to really understand or ascertain. And it'll be, time will tell how far AI will be able to take us there as well.
Yeah, and I'd like to add also the importance in terms of leadership skills, team skills, and David Ragland, our colleague, is not here for this session, but he did present in the leadership session and emphasize the importance of how human skills will become even more critical. So as we look at innovation and creativity, this is really our advantage as humans. As AI will free up maybe more automated activities, what will be critical for us is to really, as leaders, as managers, and team members, to look at how to develop those critical thinking abilities, creativity, innovative thinking, all of the skills and communication, collaboration, all of the skills that are truly human are going to be of more importance in the future to innovate effectively and successfully. And so that's where you'll see differentiation between AI and human abilities. And I think that it will place more opportunities for leaders and teams moving forward.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Karina, especially in a global sense where you've got a very multicultural sort of world, and leaders who need to be definitely multicultural sensitive and aware.
Yeah. Great. Well, we're coming up close on the hour, but I just wanted to take kind of a look at what everyone said. What is your biggest preoccupation right now? What's important for our current this current turbulent and dynamic environment and what you see in your organization. So I see moving everything online. Yeah, we can see that's been challenging for everyone to move everything online. It's interesting, great opportunity or period for learning from each other, how to be more innovative online, right? And obsolescence through incrementalism. Oh, that's an interesting one. Looking at the widening gap between soft skills and technical skills, with the latter getting the largest focus. Yeah, well, we hope here at Global Minds Network to turn that around and really place more attention on soft skills now, and which will be critical in the future. Here we have cash flow. Okay, focusing on investments, initiatives, and having full internal support. Not being able to act entirely due to current business cash limitations. It's an interesting one. Any last thoughts on that, Bryan?
Again, I think it just means you have to be sort of really brutal on, you know, which are the initiatives that you can really work on and finance effectively, and really focus on sometimes 1, 2, or 3, and maybe that's all, and you just have to leave the rest for another day when those resources can come back. Not that they're not important, but it's really tough to make, you know, those kinds of decisions to focus on what might only be 1 or 2 initiatives in the short term.
Yeah, that's true. I have another comment from, you saw that, Pito Kamara. I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Bryan.
Yes.
Yeah, so yes, what would have taken 10 years is now happening in 10 weeks. True, that's amazing. And it just shows our human potential to innovate and collaborate, right? So so these are exciting times, and which create more opportunities. So it's really a great time for us to look at the positive and capture those opportunities moving ahead.
Yeah. Favor goes to the risk taker.
Yes, that's great. Okay, so we just have a few minutes left, and before we conclude, I'd just like to share last few thoughts with you, and just last few thoughts on how we can help you moving forward, and looking at how we can stay in contact also. We look forward to co-create solutions with you and moving forward, exploring challenges and opportunities with you. And so keep us in mind for your global innovation readiness solutions. And we're really here to help prepare international leaders and teams to successfully innovate and collaborate. And we do so around our 3 change levers: vision, to look at how to facilitate co-creation and help leadership development, and also looking at dialogue to look at how to facilitate and ensure knowledge sharing and collaboration, and then space, how to help you nurture your global innovation culture by aligning readiness, driving collaboration, ensuring that you also have an execution process to go to market. So for more info, we want to thank everyone today for your engagement, all your wonderful questions, and for joining us on this journey. And we want to wish you bon voyage. Keep in touch. You have my contact information there, and you can stay updated with us via LinkedIn, our company page there. And there's more, because we look forward to supporting your global innovation readiness journey. So please do keep in touch. We'll be following up with a feedback survey. Look forward to your responses there on how we can help you with our next Global Innovation Readiness Series, which topics are of interest. Do keep in touch through our LinkedIn page as mentioned and our newsletter. We have a global readiness evaluation tool, so we invite you to go there as well, where we can give you more feedback and even an hour assessment online if you like. And there's also the scorecard, which you can go there and really find out whether you're truly a world cruise planner or global readiness champion. We are launching a Global Innovation Readiness benchmark study this summer. So we look forward to your participation and would be happy to share the findings with you if you participate. And finally, there's summer reading. So if you're looking for more summer reading, we have the book on leading global innovation, which shares the framework and gives you more insights through case studies and contributions from some of our thought leaders. And you have the link there. So with that, I would like to thank everyone again, and wishing you a wonderful summer and a very successful innovation journey ahead. And please keep in touch and stay safe. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.